إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه وبعد. My dear brothers, somebody asked me a question once. I was speaking at there's a talk show that I do on CII Channel Islam every week throughout the year, and somebody asked me this question. They said, can money buy happiness? So I said, yes, but you need to know where to find it. So money can buy happiness, but not where we think it is. And that's what led to then developing this lecture on what we call Can Money Buy Happiness? To understand this, we have to understand that in life there are two kinds of hunger. Two kinds of hungers. There is a hunger of the body and there is a hunger of the spirit. A hunger of the body and a hunger of the soul, the spirit. The hunger of the body is driven by two things: fear and greed. Fear that tomorrow I will not have enough. Allah said, Inna shaitana ya'idukumul faqr. The shaitan frightens you with faqr, with poverty. So the fear which drives the hunger of the body is the fear of poverty, that somehow I will become poor, somehow I will not have enough. Either I will become completely poor, destitute, or I will lose at least some of my wealth. And that is what actually drives some people to suicide when the stock exchange dips. So when the man sees his net worth coming down, then he takes a flying leap from the 20th floor. But the sad thing is that when he jumps out of the 20th floor, when he meets the pavement, he still was 20 million. But that 20 million was not enough to drive away that fear. So he decided to kill himself. The second driver of the hunger of the body is greed. And subhanAllah, we have seen so many signs of this around us, more particularly in the more recent times. Greed. To have more, to eat more, to consume more. Greed that drives people who don't understand that possessions add cost, not value. Possessions add cost, not value. Greed that convinces you that the value of a human being depends on his or her possessions. Greed that convinces you that you are the shirt you wear, you are the shoes you wear, you are the watch you wear, you are the car you drive, you are the neighborhood in which you live. You must seriously think about this, because if you go to one of the big mansions in Beverly Hills, for example, one of the number one neighborhoods in the world, right? And if I asked you to write down the address, the street address of the owner of the house and of the dog which lives in the kennel in that house, the street address would be exactly the same. Yes or no? The street address of the owner of the mansion and of his dog is exactly the same. SubhanAllah, Ajib, this world and how it runs. And so therefore, we are sold this story And those of us who are mentally challenged, we buy this story. That somehow a person who lives in a bigger house, who drives a bigger car, who consumes more, who is less carbon efficient, who is less oxygen efficient, who generates more garbage. These are other definitions of people who consume more. We are convinced and we are told to believe that somehow these people are better human beings than others, more worthy of respect, and therefore they should be deferred to. And therefore you should stand up if they come, and therefore you should address them with honorable titles, and therefore you must call them to this function and that function and to grace this seat and that seat and so on and so forth. This is what we are convinced. Why? Because the man has more possessions. And interestingly, we take this a step further, where even to actually have that possession is not important. Even to actually own that thing is not important. You must just appear to own it. And that is where the entire interest-based credit system comes into play. So if I can swipe my credit card and I can buy a watch, the watch actually belongs to the bank. But I am wearing it, so I am honored by the watch. If I can get a loan and buy a house, the house actually belongs to the bank. And of course some of us discover that. The day you cannot pay the installment of the loan, then you discover that the thing which actually belongs to you is the pavement outside the house, because that is where you end up. And the house goes to the bank, to which the house belonged anyway. But as long as you could fob off this deception on the public that the house belongs to me, and people respected you. And that's why I say some people buy a watch to tell the time, and some people buy a watch to tell the world. Time has nothing to do with it. And therefore, this world is based on this deception and driven by hunger of the body, fear and greed. Deceiving others apparently, but really deceiving yourself. And then allowing this self-inflicted deception to draw upon itself and upon you anxiety and stress and heartburn and envy and cardiac illness, all sorts of things that are the results of that deception, to keeping up appearances, not adding value, keeping up appearances. How can I wear the same suit twice? How can I wear the same dress to this wedding when I wore the same dress for the last wedding? And neither of them was mine own. I'm talking about the wedding, not the dress. So greed drives the individual to work harder and harder and accumulate more and more possessions and experience more and more sensations. To run from sensation to sensation, possession to possession, searching for happiness. It's a very desolate kind of a picture, if you look at it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened my eyes to this very early. When I first went to America to live there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed and made it happen that I went for 40 days in Jamaat in New York. And it was summer and it was a walking Jamaat. So we used to go from masjid to masjid carrying our luggage with us on the subway. And because it was summer and because the people we wanted to meet, the taxi drivers and the waiters and hotels and so on, the poor people, they were available only late in the night. So we used to go to meet them, and they would collect in this apartment or that apartment, or maybe this musalla or that musalla. And all these meetings would happen very late in the night, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So we would walk from the masjid, whichever masjid we were staying in, to whichever musalla or whatever was nearby. And if you walk on the streets of New York after 11 or 12, after midnight, in summer, then you see the real nature of New York. And you understand why the Americans say about the city, they say New York City ain't got no pity. So there's no pity in New York City. It's seriously, subhanAllah, ajib. They come out of the earth. They come out of the earth. Who? People. Out of which earth? Out of subway tunnels where they live. They sleep in the subway tunnels because the tunnel is heated. And they sleep next to the electrified railway track. So ask me what happens if in the sleep the person turns and maybe their hand touches the railway line. There is a flash. And why do they come out of the tunnels? I was walking on one of these occasions. We were walking through the upmarket neighborhood of Mayfair. $1 million flats, $1 million apartments, and that's the starting cost. And I saw so much garbage on the street, literally on the street, on the pavement. So I said to the friends who were with me, I said, such a expensive and such rich people live here and they can't even take care of garbage. And what's this? Why is all this garbage on the street? And this is New York, it's not India. If you find garbage on the street in India, we are not surprised. But in New York, that also in a place like Mayfair. So my friend laughed and he said, that is what they come out for. And he told me the whole story about the people from the underground. So I said, why do they come out? Why do they come here to Mayfair? He said, man, because the richest locality has the best garbage. Ajib. Desolation. 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 The richest locality has the best garbage. Poodles are taken for a walk by the maid and by the valet, and the poodle wears a jeweled collar, and a human being has to come out of the ground to eat out of the garbage cans of the people who live in that place. That is the dream that we are chasing. That is the dream that we are chasing. Ajib, eh? Hunger of the body, greed. I thought of doing a little bit of research, and I found some interesting things. One of the things I found was, and this is before the subprime crisis and the crash of the market, I found that 25% of the American population, US population, 10.8 million people, owe more on their homes than the house is worth. So if they're living in $1 million house, they actually owe to the bank maybe 2, maybe 3 million. Can you imagine? And of course, what happens if you stop paying? You realize that the illusion was not free. The illusion was not free. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about such a race, He said, Alhaakumut takathur hatta zurtumul maqabir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that this mutual rivalry of piling up things, possessions and possessions and possessions and more and more and more stuff, more stuff. He said this diverts you and will continue to divert you, and it will end only when you visit your grave. A ziyarah of the qabr. And Rasulullah said, this is a hunger which only the turab of the qabr will assuage and will finish and will complete when it enters the mouth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us that one day we have to meet Him. And that is what every Nabi came to advise, that we have to meet Allah. But we live in a world which tells us the opposite. So when we are hungry, hunger of the body, when this hunger is there, the world interprets it and says that the way to fill this vast void in the middle is to put even more stuff inside. And if you ask them, well, I've already been putting all this stuff inside, it still doesn't fill. How come more? No, you didn't put enough. You didn't put enough. So buy more, travel more holidays, and so on and so on and so on. More and more and more. The second kind of hunger is the hunger of the spirit, the hunger of the soul. And this hunger is that which seeks closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ala bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Allah said, the itminan of the qalb, the peace of the soul, the peace of the qalb is by the zikr of Allah. It's not by eating more and drinking more and more drugs and more alcohol and more women or more money or more possessions. It is by the dhikr and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He told us why He created us. And that's why I'm saying the hunger will be finished only when we realize why Allah created us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Zariyat, the famous ayat, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And to re-emphasize that and to take away our fear, He said, مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah and I created you. I did not create the jinn and ins except to worship me. I created not the jinn and insan, humans, except that they should worship me. And I do not seek any provision from them, nor do I ask that they should feed me. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider and the owner of power, Dhul Quwwatil Mateen, by His strength. And that's why the hunger of the soul can only be satisfied with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The soul seeks to fulfill its purpose. And when the person allows it to do that, then the soul is satisfied. It cooperates, the person cooperates with the soul in seeking the pleasure of Allah. And then the soul is at peace and content. The problem happens when we seek to fulfill the hunger of the soul by things that are meant for the body. Let me give you an example. If you're actually physically feeling hungry, and we are sitting now very close to the time of iftar, inshallah, maybe another 45 minutes and 1 hour or something, it will be time, inshallah, for us to break our fast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasting, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the two pleasures that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said are the pleasures of the fasting person. He said he feels two pleasures. He feels the pleasure two times. He said once when he breaks his fast, and once when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him. So now when you're sitting here hungry, if I were to project on this wall behind me beautiful three-dimensional images of a triple chocolate sundae, right? Or whatever else. I can immediately see smiles on Hamza's face first. If I project, I'm sure a lot of you are also salivating. The moment I said triple Sunday, people are swallowing. Suddenly you get. If I project images of your favorite food on the screen behind me, and maybe we have a machine, an aroma machine, which also lets out a little flavor, so now you start smelling beautiful aroma of whatever you like, of nasi lemak or something. Will your hunger increase or decrease? Increase. You are sitting here peacefully, not thinking about food, trying not to think about food, right? And your hunger was in control. And now suddenly out of the blue, I'm projecting these brilliant images, three-dimensional images, and then there are these flavors, these beautiful smells of food. It'll just drive you crazy. It'll drive you crazy. You know why the pornographic industry is so successful? Somebody was telling me, I remember seeing something somewhere, I was listening to a TED talk on TED, and they said that in a given year, and I may be wrong with the exact numbers, but he said in a given year, Hollywood makes, not a year, per month or something like that. He says Hollywood makes maybe 30 movies, but the pornographic industry makes 13,000 movies. And this guy also said that the average, and he's talking about the American population, and all of you need not sit here feeling very good about yourselves. Of course, I'm sure you don't do it, but populations are the same across the world in this particular respect, unfortunately. He said the average American school boy, he's not talking about the average American male, he's saying the average American school boy watches more than 15 pornographic films per week. So that's what, 2 per day or something? One after breakfast, one after lunch or something. Allah knows best. La hawla la quwwata. What is the purpose of that? At the end of watching a pornographic movie, what have you got? Nothing. You're just as hard up as you were, except that now you are even more hard up than you were, right? Because you are trying to fulfill the real need, the real hunger is where? Is in the spirit. It's in the spirit. The loneliness, the desolation of the heart, the emptiness of the heart, the depression. In India, the highest suicide rate, interestingly, the highest suicide rate is in India. First statement. And second statement is that the highest of that suicide rate is in the population between the ages of 13 and 23. Young people are killing themselves. Why? Why? As I sit here, I can recall at least 3 cases of suicides that I personally know about among my friends, the children of my friends, between the ages of 13 and 25. Why? Because we live disconnected lives, completely disconnected lives. How many of us are here in whose homes there is regular talk about Allah? Seriously reflect and think. Your fathers, your grandfathers, you yourselves, how many of you talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis? How many of you describe the beauty and the glory and magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis? How many of you talk about the glory of Jannah? How many of you tell your children and tell yourselves to say, let us seek Jannah? How many of you sit with your children and say, what did you do today to earn Jannah? What did you put in your bank today? Which bank? وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ. The bank which is with Allah. What did you put today? And who are you talking to? You're talking to your 10-year-old, and you're talking to your 5-year-old, and you're talking to your 15-year-old, and you're talking to your 17-year-old. How many of you do this? How many of you have such conversations in your homes where your fathers or your mothers say this? And how many of you are dependent on some outside agency, some Maulvi or Maulana or something, or some course or some function in the masjid where it is organized? You are dependent on that day when it happens. And how many of you are among those that even when that happens, you are still not there? So even from that you don't benefit. And then you are very surprised. And then you are very surprised when one day your 13-year-old and your 15-year-old and your 17 and 18-year-old kills himself or kills herself because they are desolate. They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go. They are disconnected with the world. They are disconnected with Allah. They have lost all hope. They are in a state of despair. And yet they are born in a Muslim home. It's bad enough when anybody commits suicide. It's not as if it's a good thing when a non-Muslim commits suicide. Suicide is such a pointless thing. It is the ultimate expression of a pointless existence. Totally meaningless, has no meaning whatsoever. And that is why in Islam suicide is haram. Suicide is haram. Even when the Sahaba Rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, when they were being tortured, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, have sabr. He did not say commit suicide. Did he say kill yourself? No. He said have sabr. Inshallah Allah will help you. Ya Rasulullah, they're beating me every day, they're torturing me every day. Have sabr, have sabr, have sabr. Allah will help you. And Allah helped them. You see, you realize why these things happen. It's not in a vacuum. It happens because the name of Allah has become a stranger in your homes. The name of Muhammadur Rasulullah is a stranger in your homes. Seeking to please Allah, the thought is a stranger. You feel embarrassed when somebody says that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, music is haram. And you, not only do you listen to music, but then you also want to argue with those who say music is haram. So you spend time and energy and money in researching and trying to find, within quotes, proofs that music is permissible or certain kinds of music is permissible. And then you spend money spreading this information all over society. Alhamdulillah. And then you are very surprised when that music takes over the mind of your child. When the satanic messages of the music take over the mind of your child. Believe me, I know every one of those tunes. When the satanic messages take over the mind of the child and your child commits suicide. Why? Because instead of inculcating in the child a love for the kalam of Allah, you want a tune? Listen to the kalam of Allah. Listen to the kalam of your Rabb. Instead of inculcating a love for that, you inculcated and allowed them to inculcate in themselves a love for the voice of shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually called it the voice of shaitan. Read Surah Al-Isra. Read the surahs. Read the Quran. My brothers and sisters, reality doesn't change because we don't want to believe it. Think about this. One of the problems with this greed, and I mentioned specifically pornography, and I should mention also, for example, drugs. is it seeks two things: more and more variety. Greater and greater intensity and greater variety. The same doesn't satisfy anymore. So you need a bigger fix, and you need a fix which will take you to a different place. And that is why the person who is smoking pot is not satisfied with pot. At some point he graduates to heroin, and these are the terms that are used. And he's not satisfied with heroin, and he graduates from there to cocaine, and he's not satisfied with that, and he graduates from there to LSD, and so on and so forth. Greater and greater sensation and more variety. And so also with other things. I don't want to sit here and describe all the different forms of perversion that happen, but I know that we all live in the same world, and so we know what those are. It's very interesting. If you look at go and Google celebrity suicides, make some interesting reading. And if you look at the names on that list of celebrity suicides, you will find that these people, they had money. They had more money than you and I will probably ever earn. And alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Remember, if you die with halal wealth, you will give hisab. If you die with haram wealth, you are in the hellfire. Whatever you leave behind on the face of this earth, you are going to account to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. So don't be so happy and say, well, my wealth is halal. If your wealth is halal, so was the wealth of Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu. Do you think your wealth is more halal than the wealth of Abdurrahman ibn Auf? When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the bashara of Jannah, the last person he gave it to was Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu. And he said to him, when he gave him the bashara of Jannah, he said, I almost thought that you are not going to get the bashara of Jannah. And Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu started weeping. He said, Ya Rasulullah, what did I do? He said, you spent a lot of time giving hisab for your wealth. He said, the hisab for your wealth took so long that I thought Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will detain you. So these celebrity suicides, if you look at their list on Google, they had money, they had fame, they had beauty, they had all the brands in the world. As I was saying yesterday, I think, you have a Louis Vuitton clutch purse, they had a Louis Vuitton luggage suitcase. Right? But what happened? None of them could stop them from a haram death. None of them took care of the emptiness of the spirit. None of those possessions. Michael Jackson, what did he not have? And he spent all his wealth trying to be something other than what he was. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him. He's from African descent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him with a beautiful black skin. And he wanted to turn white. And the beach resorts are filled with people who were born with a beautiful white skin. And they're trying to turn black. La hawla quwwata illa billah. People are never satisfied, huh? You spend all your life lying down on the beach and getting burnt in the sun. Why? Because I want to get a tan. And those who, like me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with an inbuilt tan. Now you want to lose your tan. Fairness creams. La hawla wa la quwwata. How, what can be lower than a man using a fairness cream? Huh? What is worse than a man using a fairness cream? A man shaving his beard. That is worse than a man using a fairness cream. A woman with a beard is a freak. Yes or no? You're laughing, eh? Have you ever seen a woman with a full beard? A woman with a beard is a freak, is a circus piece. They put her in a cage and you pay some money to go look at her. A man without a beard is also a freak. They should also do that. Put him in a cage and you go pay some money and say, well, I want to see a man without a beard. What does it look like? Huh? Because all the men I know have beards. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Kabhi kuch to sharam karo yaar, kitte tariqe se bolna, I don't understand this. How many times and how many ways? I keep inventing ways of talking about this business of shaving your face. La ilaha illallah. My dear brothers and sisters, if you want to find something, there are two conditions. One is that the thing itself must exist. And second one is that you must look for it in the right place. Right? If you say, I want to find a unicorn, which is the right place to find a unicorn? In India. There is no place to find a unicorn because unicorn doesn't exist. There's no right place to find something which doesn't exist. So first of all, the first condition is the thing should exist. And secondly, the thing might exist, but you need to go look for it in the right place. Because if you, supposing you say, I want to find an anaconda. Where would you go to look for an anaconda? Yeah? Amazon. If you go to the Amazon to look for an anaconda, you don't find the anaconda. The anaconda finds you. So the best place to look for an anaconda is in a zoo. Right? If you go and look for an anaconda in the anaconda finds you. You don't want that, right? You want to find the anaconda. So you got to look for the thing in the right place. And that's why I say, can money buy happiness? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because happiness does exist. Get this very clear in your mind. Huh? Happiness is not a figment of your imagination. Happiness is real. Happiness exists. You can live a very, very happy life. Absolutely state of delight, 24 hours. Total happiness. So it exists, it is there. But we got to look for it in the right place. Where do people normally look for it? In shopping malls, in multiplexes, in the idiot box, in soap operas, in fast cars, in faster people, in big houses, branded accessories. Does it exist there? Does it exist in your can of Coke or a can of Pepsi or a can of Red Bull? How can a Muslim drink something when he does not know the ingredients? And that is the most polite way of saying it. Do you know what is in Red Bull? The ingredients, do you actually know that? Yes or no? No. How do you drink it? How is it halal? How is it halal? Tell me, how is it halal? You are mufti, mashallah. Give me a fatwa. Is it halal for a Muslim to eat or drink something where he does not know the ingredients? Period. So you want to break your fast with haram? Mashallah, very nice. You want to do your suhoor with haram? That is the extent of your knowledge? This is the difference. This is the difference between information and knowledge. Gathering of random data is one thing, but converting it into knowledge, converting it into something which is beneficial is something else. Happiness is not in any of these places. Why? Because happiness is a state of the mind and a state of the soul. It's not a state of the body. Happiness is a state of the soul. Example, Sayyidina Bilal bin Rabah radiallahu anhu. Long after passing away of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was in Baghdad and somebody asked him, they said, tell me, what was the happiest moment of your life? When were you happiest? And Bilal bin Rabah radiallahu anhu says, I was happiest when Umayyah bin Khalaf used to torture me, when he used to throw me on the sand and he would beat me and he would put on metal armor on me and leave me to burn in the sand, when he would put a rock on my chest and I kept saying, Ahadun Ahad, Ahadun Ahad. So they asked him, why did you say Ahadun Ahad? He said, because by saying Ahadun Ahad used to drive him crazy. He would get more angry and more angry and more angry. The more I said Ahadun Ahad, he would hit me more and he would get more angry and it would drive him crazy. So I kept driving him crazy. Ajib, I mean, just think about this. Here is a man who's being tortured by his slave master. What does your logic tell you? Make your slave master more angry or less angry? Which one? Less angry, right? But here is this man, he's trying to make him more angry. And not only that, after suffering all of that, years later when they asked him, what was the happiest moment of your life? He said, that was the happiest moment of my life. He said, I was the happiest then. So obviously his body is not in any state of comfort. He's being tortured, right? So where is this happiness coming from? Soul. His soul, his spirit, his ruh is connected to Allah. When he's saying Ahadun Ahad, his soul is connected to Allah. And that's why Asya alayhi salam, the wife of Firaun said, kill her. And they went and laid her down, and he ordered that a huge rock should be smashed onto her. And when they brought the rock to throw it on her, she made that dua in the Quran. Rabbi ibni li indak baytan fil jannah. Said, oh my Rabb, give me a house with you in Jannah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the sky opened and Allah showed her a house in Jannah. And her soul was taken out before the stone could touch her. So she didn't feel anything. Allah protects. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects those who are His faithful slaves. Allah does not allow them to suffer. My brothers and sisters, happiness exists in feeling the grace and majesty of our Rabb. When we stand before Him on the day when the sun has gone down, when we stand before Him when the stars have gone to sleep, when we stand before Him when there is no one awake except our Rabb and us. You feel happiness when you talk about the glory and majesty of your Rabb. Everything else becomes secondary. You don't feel anything else because you're connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Happiness comes when the slave makes sujood. Because when he makes sajda before the arsh of Ar-Rahman, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Happiness exists in living our lives in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing yarjullaha wal yawm al-akhirah, hoping for the meeting with Allah. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu was dying. It was his last moments of his life. He was in his bed when Abdul Malik bin Marwan, the Khalifa, came to meet him. And he sat with him, he made his i'adah, and he said to him, may Allah cure your illness and may Allah give you a long life. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Shaykhul Hadith of this ummah, The man who recorded and reported the largest number of ahadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Huraira looked heavenwards, and he said, "Oh my Rabb, I heard from your Habib that the slave who wants to meet you, you also want to meet him." And he said, "Oh my Rabb, you know that I want to meet you." And before Malik bin Marwan could reach the door of the house, Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu's soul had departed. His Rabb wanted to meet him. My brothers and sisters, let me tell you where to find happiness. Our happiness is in the bellies of the hungry. Our happiness is in drying the tears of the bereaved. It's not in the malls. It is not in the malls. Our happiness is in kindling hope in the hearts of those who are sunk in despair. It's in putting the smiles back on the faces of the orphans and the widows and of the men who are left alone when everything that they worked for and lived for in the world was destroyed. Happiness lies in extending your hand and holding the hand of the one in front of you, helping them to stand up. And the greatest happiness lies in standing beside the one who is oppressed, in support of that person against the oppressor. And that is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the peak of Iman is to speak the truth before the jabber, before the one who is an oppressor. I am reminded of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, our Rabb's commandment for every one of his slave is, spend on others and I will spend on you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this hadith is in Bukhari, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, spend on others and I will spend on you. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, do not hoard, because otherwise Allah will withhold from you. And this is hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. He said, do not withhold, because Allah will withhold from you. I am reminded that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that when we go to visit the sick in the evening, 70,000 angels pray for our forgiveness till the morning. And when we go to visit the sick in the morning, 70,000 angels pray for our forgiveness till the evening. Seems strange. I'm reminded when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the hadith, he said, if you fear poverty, give sadaqah. He said, if you fear poverty, give sadaqah. Seems strange until I think about the principle of agriculture. What is the principle of agriculture? If you want a crop, what must you do? Sow seeds. What you have in your hand is your harvest. What you throw in the ground is your seed. It's the same thing, same grain. If you want wheat, you don't plant rice. What you have in your hand is your harvest. What you let go and throw in the ground is the seed. If you plant the seed, if you open your hand and let it go, then you get a harvest which is always more than what you had in your hand. A handful of seed, no matter how poor the conditions, will always produce more than one handful. My brothers and sisters, for something to come down from the heavens, something has to leave the earth. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the conditions of fasad, the conditions of trials and tribulations that you are seeing on the sea and on the land is a result of the deeds that leave the hands of people. بما كسبت أيدي الناس. You do good, you get good. You do evil, you get evil. My brothers and sisters, I want to remind myself and you that only empty hands can hold. A fist cannot hold anything. If your hand is locked and closed, it cannot hold anything. To be able to hold, you have to open your hands, empty your hands. So the sooner something leaves your hand, the sooner something will leave the heavens to find you, so that you can become the conduit of your Rabb to give to the people. I remind myself and you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this ummah. He sent us to give to the world. And that's why He sent us with two of His usul. The world runs on two usul. What are the two principles? Fear and greed. But Allah sent us with two other principles. What are those principles? Love and hope. Love and hope. He sent us with the tools to take from His treasures. And what is the name of that tool? Tahajjud. Salah. Al-Miftahul Jannah, the key to the Jannah. He sent us with a tool to take from His treasures and to give to the people. As long as a conduit pipe is open and free, water will flow through it. And when water is flowing through the pipe, it is only natural that the pipe gets wet. How can the pipe remain dry when water is flowing through it? But when there is a block in the pipe, two things happen. What is the first thing that happens? The pipe dries out. And what's the second thing that happens? The flow of water stops. And therefore, the owner of the pipe, what will he do? He will smash the block. He will break the block. And if it's a block that doesn't break, then what does the owner do? He does bypass surgery. He cuts off that piece and throws it away, and he puts a piece which is free. It's our choice. Do you want to live in this world driven by fear and greed, or do you want to live in this world with love and hope? The choice is yours. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.